In the next 60 minutes, we want to talk about intelligent chatbots in Microsoft Teams. I'm too far away. Interesting. My name is Göelles. I'm working for a company called SOLVION from Austria.
My name is Stephan Bisser, working at the same company, same country.
And if nobody told you yet, when you see these slides, the bottom line is called the ego part, where everybody's bragging what he's doing. We don't want to talk about that. All you see today is actually already available at this URL. So if you want to make a picture, just make a picture of this slide. All the links, everything is there, because we don't want to wait every time, because quite now we could wait for everyone to make the picture, because they give us the big room at the last possible day. But everything is there, and there's also everything from the last 2.5 weeks, so every content available. All the demos you see are there on YouTube as well, so if you don't follow along, you can click them through over there as well. Okay, hopefully you had the chance already in the last couple of days to get the idea of Microsoft Teams explained from smart people staying on this stage or in different rooms. They were talking about communication, collaboration, work with confidence in Microsoft Teams. We are focusing on customizing and extending the platform. So today, or this session, is more on really the customization. If you think about Microsoft Teams, the idea is that you stay in the context of the user, that you infuse your user's environment with information from different systems into the hub for teamwork. That's Microsoft Teams. We're going to show you some demos, how we're going to do this with bots, because in Microsoft Teams, the idea is that you have like the real digital transformation with your apps and services already present. So you have different systems, you have a CRM system, you have an ERP system, or whatever else is out there, and then you want to connect it to Microsoft Teams. And this connection can happen through quite some options. In the end, the idea is that you consume a service, then you use one of those extension methods in Microsoft Teams, and then surface the context-relevant information, the context-relevant tasks, approvals in Microsoft Teams, so that your users don't need to switch apps. This means single sign-on. This means staying in the context, staying in the place, not opening another browser, not open up another application, stay where you are, and decide on approval, for example, or act on other information that different systems are feeding into Microsoft Teams. Overall in Microsoft Teams, there are quite a few options to extend the platform, but we want to focus on bots. So hopefully you all attended the various sessions from Sebastian, from Mike Emerlan, from Victor earlier today, about all the different options you have in extension points in Microsoft Teams. With bots, of course, we also talk about consuming the Microsoft Graph to use the data that's exposed through this great layer. And as you can see on the right side, of course, Microsoft is also thinking on not only use the apps in your own tenant, but if you are a systems integrator or ISV, also create apps that can be offered in the global store so that everyone can take part in it and everyone can consume the app in the global store. But be careful with that, because you have to think about different scenarios in that case. Data protection, privacy, terms of use. It's a little bit different if you think that, okay, potentially I may be consumed on a global scale and not only within my tenant. So that's something a few customers of ours, they were like, okay, we want to have it in the Teams store, and then they tried to put it globally, and they're like, no, it's your local thing. There's a tenant catalog as well, so stay in your premises or really go out if you have the use case for it. And that's an important thing. If you look at this picture, it happens way to us and way too many times already for us that people approach us and say, we want to have a bot. And then a discussion starts and like, okay, what's the use case of the bot? What should the bot do? And it sounds a little bit funny, but most of the times the answer is, we want a bot. So there is no use case. And that's actually quite bad, because you could end up, I don't know, investing 20, 40, or whatever is big in your mind days, and end up without a use case. With that, I want to hand over to Stephan.
Yeah, so speaking about use cases, whenever you're actually starting building bots, the most simplest thing for building bots actually is to replace or modernize your FAQs. So whenever you're at a company or at an organization which has a really large amount of employees and stuff like that, you end up having various data silos within that company. So you may end up with, you have like some departmental knowledge, which could be stored, for example, in SharePoint or in OneNote or whatever. You could end up with company info, which may be stored on your public-facing website or on in your HR system or anywhere else. And then, of course, you will most probably have some kind of IT help desk support, whatever you want to call it, system. And there you have data as well, knowledge as well stored in there. And if a user actually now has a question, it's a pretty hard task for the user to first think about where they can search that information for, where they can look it up before they can actually seek that information from that service. And so with a bot, what you actually could do is to grab those data silos and provide a single point of contact for your end users. So your end users will actually end up with having just a bot, for example, in Teams. And what the bot actually does, it connects to those data silos in the backend and grabs the information, indexes the information, and then serves that information through one channel, which could then, of course, be Teams or whatever. And so users will end up being knowing that they only have to use that bot instead of connecting to those various data silos by themselves. And therefore, they will have like a big advantage in getting information. Much faster, much smoother, much easier to get that information than, especially if you think about new hires. So if a new hire comes to your company, they most probably won't know that there are various data silos and where they can get data from, or even whom to contact if they need something. And therefore, if you have a bot introduced, then you could actually say, whenever you have a question, go to the bot first, and then if the bot doesn't know the answer, he should connect you to a subject matter expert of some sorts. And that's the most easiest use case, because you don't have to spend, like Tommy said it earlier, 40 or 60 or whatever days to actually introduce that bot. We're actually going to show you that bot connected to one data source, which will be happening in 15 minutes of time from start to beginning till the bot is finished. And so we're going to end up setting up Q&A Maker, which is actually the knowledge store for us. We're going to set up the bot, publish the bot. Then we're going to test it, of course. There's a test in web chat functionality, so we can test it before actually put it in production. And then if we say, okay, we're good to go, tests have all finished and successful, we connect it to Teams, and then we could add, of course, add more capabilities and make it not only a bot within Teams, but make it a Teams app, so you could add tabs with it, you could add messaging extensions with it, and so on and so forth. But actually, that's gonna what we do right now. So first demo, we're gonna set up a bot. As I said, 15 minutes should be enough, so please watch the time.
I will.
Yeah, I know. So first of all, what we're gonna do, or prerequisites, if you want to do it on your own, is that first of all you have an Azure subscription. So you have a valid Azure subscription, you have owner or contributor rights to the Azure subscription, so you can actually create things in that Azure subscription. Next up, what you want to do is go to a page called qnamaker.ai. QA Maker is one of the cognitive services which are served as API endpoints within your Azure subscription, and that actually provides you with the ability to have some kind of knowledge base storing right within Azure, and you can actually hit that knowledge base from an API endpoint, so you can consume it within your bot, but also in any other application if you want to. So I'm at my QA Maker list here, and my QA Maker page. I'm logged in with my user, and therefore I want to create a new knowledge base up here. So actually, we're going to walk through those 5 steps which are mentioned here. First step would be create a Q&A service within your Azure subscription. I've already done that because of the timing. Next up, what I need to do is to connect to my Azure AD, to get my subscriptions from that Azure AD, which are connected there, to get my Azure Q&A services, which I created there, and then what I can do is to select the language. So you'll see right now this is grayed out because I've already created one knowledge base within that Q&A service, so therefore it takes that language. But if you want to, or if you go ahead and create a brand new Q&A service from Azure, you could actually choose which language you want to use. So you could use, of course, English, but of course you could also use German or Spanish or whatever to make the performance and that pattern recognition even better. Next up, we want to give it a name, so we're going to end up using some sort of ESPC Q&A KB. And then we can actually populate the knowledge base. So if I don't want to start from scratch, but I have a public-facing website where I have like FAQs stored in there, I could actually do that. So I switch over to a docs link, which is about upgrading from Skype for Business to Teams. There's an FAQ page for that. So I'm going to grab that link, paste it in here, and say add URL. And then I could also choose between a couple of chit-chat personalities, so all the chit-chat questions will be already automatically added to your knowledge base, so you don't have to care about them. And then I'm good to go to create my knowledge base. So what happens now actually is that the Q&A service reaches out to Azure Search in order to create a new search index within my Azure Search environment to store the data, to index the data there. And that should be a matter of a couple of seconds, actually. And when it's created, what we should then see is that the Q&A service actually reached out to that FAQ page from docs.microsoft.com and extracted the content there. So the Q&A service looked up for the HTML tags within that website. So it looked up for headings and paragraphs, apparently. And each heading, then of some sort, will be a question, and each paragraph followed, which is following the heading, will be the answer. So, for example, we have here a question coming from that page: why is Microsoft Teams replacing Skype for Business Online? And then we have the exact answer, which apparently is coming from our page here. So this is the first question, same answer, and therefore it's quite easy to actually reuse the content you have right now, because most probably you will be ending up having some sort of FAQ pages right now. If they're on a public-facing website, you could just use Q&A Maker to auto-extract that. What we also got in there is the chit-chat questions and answers. So there are a lot of pre-defined questions and answers in there, dealing with the most commonly used questions coming from users, so you don't actually have to care about them. Of course, you can modify them to make them fit your needs. But what I also want to do is that I not only have public-facing sources, I also have some sources stored within my company network. So I have a SharePoint Online tenant, for example, where I also have some sort of knowledge stored. And I want to actually grab that knowledge which is stored there as well. So I switch over to my SharePoint site, to my SharePoint intranet, for example. And within that SharePoint intranet, what I have is, for example, an Excel file. An Excel file which is really simple. So we have only two columns, question and answer. And I can actually use that Excel file and give it to the Q&A Maker service to say, please extract that Excel file as well. So if I grab the link from the Excel file, what I can do is to go over to my Q&A service. And under settings, I find all the settings in there. I find all the URLs I have in there. And I can actually add that SharePoint URL as well. So you will be ending up not only having the ability to grab public content, but also grab your content, which is actually stored on your behalf in your SharePoint on-premises or online tenant. So if I'm gonna click Save and Train, which will actually recreate or re-index the whole knowledge base in there. You saw a small pop-up coming up, which apparently went away after 1 second. If you do that the first time, you will be asked for granting permissions to the Q&A service in order to reach out to your SharePoint tenant, give the correct permissions in there. So the Q&A service has an Azure AD application registered, which is actually then used to connect to your SharePoint tenant. So if I switch back to my edit view, I should see now not only the questions coming from the public source, and not only the questions from the chit chat, but also from my Excel file, which is stored in SharePoint. And that's pretty cool, because actually what you could do now is tell your business users, just manage the Excel file, so that they don't actually have to get permissions on the Q&A Maker service itself, but they can reuse or actually use what they're used to, and don't have to switch portals, for example, or copy some information from somewhere and paste it somewhere. They should just only use their common environment. And from the bot perspective, or from the conversational AI perspective, we just reach out to those data sources and connect them within our knowledge base. So what I can do now is actually to test the bot within here. So if I say, which question do we have? Dear Vesa, for example, what I could then see in here is an answer which is coming from my Excel file. So if I switch back to my Excel, I should have a question in there which is exactly that statement with the exact same answer. And so now with that ability, as I said, you can have your business users just managing the Excel, and you from the bot architect or bot development perspective, are you just reaching out to those services the business users are actually using nowadays. So next thing.
An important thing I want to add here is that everything that Stephan clicked now is also available through an API within Q&A Maker. So if you have existing data sources with question and answers, because most of the time we see that companies already have a lot of information stored, but maybe not in the format that the Q&A Maker needs it. So your task is most probably to organize the information that's out there and then feed the Q&A Maker through its APIs. So you can create knowledge bases, you can update knowledge bases, you can add questions, you can add answers, and also train the model and publish the model. And then you use the API from the knowledge base, from the Q&A Maker, and then the bot consumes that. But as Stephan already pointed out, you don't need a bot to consume Q&A Maker. Every application that is capable of calling a REST API can also make use of this service. So your mobile application, your Windows application, anything else, not only the bot. We realized a couple of months ago that customers approached us and said, okay, I want to have this Q&A service, so I want to have a bot. No, it's a different thing. They are connected if you're using it in a bot, but you can also make use of the Q&A service in every other application. And again, the big difference, the first part where he just pointed to a public available URL and grabbed information from that, you can do it with your own company FAQ, for example, if it's structured in a way that's easily readable for the machine, or second part, secured with an Azure Active Directory application ID, so that you can really also surface your internal, your secured content from an Excel file. Regarding licensing, the Q&A Maker is basically licensed on how much content you put in there. There's a free version. The free version allows you to store, I think, 3 different URLs. It's a little bit confusing. If you click again through settings, you will see that there are only like 2 links now for the public thing and the Excel. And if Stephan would create another one, it's already saying like, no, they're free present, because the chit chat is also one. That's a little bit weird, because you see 2 here and you want to add 1 more, and they say, no, they're only 3 there. So keep in mind that the chit chat also counts to the number 3. Again, that's the free tier. If you want to store more content, you can scale up in Azure and just throw more money at it and then fit in whatever content you have.
That is true. So as Tommy already mentioned it, what you what you should get from down here, which apparently is not accessible at the moment, are the endpoint settings. So your endpoint names, the knowledge base IDs, as well as the key will be then displayed here, and then you can hit the API from whatever application, not only from a
publish it once. You only hit save and train.
Yeah, I need to publish it first. So actually, what I wanted to point it out as well is we're talking about building intelligent bots, and for building intelligent bots, you certainly will end up having some sort of language understanding. That's not language understanding. That's pretty important. That's just simple pattern matching. So, for example, if I take one question in there and go or paste it in the text window, what I can see or what I can actually do is to inspect that question. So, of course, I've pasted it same as it's stored within my knowledge base. So it says 100% confident that this is the right answer to that question. If I actually just rephrase that a bit, say how can I authenticate to Q&A maker, we'll see something different. We'll see 62%. So there's no sense of language understanding in there. It's just simple pattern recognition within my inputs. And therefore, what I would need to do if I would only just need or use that service is to not only create Q&A pairs in there, but for each Q&A pair, add alternative phrasing in there to make that service more intelligent, if you want to. But in a production use case, we're not going to demo that in depth today. I would always recommend to hook it up to Göelles, which is another cognitive service from Azure, which actually offers you language understanding, and then based on that language understanding intent, and based on the model, you reach out to various Q&A knowledge bases or any other data source if you want to. So what we have done right now, we have created the knowledge base. We have actually extracted some public URLs in there. We have extracted a SharePoint file. So what's missing is that after save and train, we want to publish it. So publish means the knowledge base becomes generally available, and the API endpoint will be created, which you see here. And right now, what you also see at the very top is a button which says Create Bot. So actually what I can do now is to create a bot from that knowledge base. So if I click that, I'll be redirected to my Azure portal, and I'll be ending up in the new or creation blade for a new web app bot. And it already has all the attributes pre-filled in there. So there's already a name in there. There's already set a resource group. The location is already set, but I want to change it to West Europe. There's already a pricing tier chosen, which is apparently the S1 is the paid version for the bot. The F0 is the free version of the bot. What I could do is I could change the SDK language, so I could change it from a C# to a Node.js bot. I have my Q&A authorization key already provided in there, so I don't need to grab that from my Q&A maker knowledge base. I have a app service already chosen, but I want to change that to make it fit. And what I could also manage is if I want to use application insights or not. We're not going to turn that on right now. But what we're going to do is we're going to create it. And there's apparently an error because the ID is already available. So I make it bot2, and then it should be available. So now, actually, the Azure portal will be creating my bot. So I can watch the deployment status over here, and it should take apparently just a few minutes or seconds to have my bot already created. So have you watched the time, by the way?
You have 2.5 minutes left.
2.5 minutes left.
You're again depending on Azure, and you blame Azure if
Good.
it's not working, I know.
So actually, if that deployment will be finished, we would be done. So let's wait for that deployment. In the meantime, what I wanted to say is that Azure right now creates all my resources which are needed for my bot. And that's not only one service, but there's a component called Web App Bot, which is created. There will be a Azure App Service created for running the whole logic from my bot in there and running the whole code. And right now, as you can see, the creation has been finished. Within my Web App Bot in the Azure portal, on the left-hand side, I have a couple of management menu entries. One of them says channels. So if I go there, I see that the web chat channel is already running. What I now need to do in order to make it available within Teams is to just click the Teams icon or the Teams tab in here, and I just want to save it. So I want to make my Teams channel become available. Of course, need to agree to the terms of use, but now actually it has been created. So if I switch back to my channels overview, we see Microsoft Teams is running. And now I have two ways actually in order to use my bot in Teams. First of them would be just clicking the Teams icon. So actually it takes me to my Teams, and I don't want to use it in my desktop version, I want to use it in the web version. And there we go. Bot is here, so I can actually communicate with the bot, and it should respond. So if I say, how do I log in to the Q&A maker, it should respond with the actual answer which is stored in the knowledge base. And off you go. So basically, we've created the bot. What I want to show you as well is if you end up using the Teams App Studio for actually creating a Teams app which has a bot capability, what you would need in order to create that app is what's being called Microsoft App ID. So that's the unique ID for the Azure bot, which is registered as a Azure AD application. What this application ID is that it basically uniquely identifies your chatbot within your Azure AD. And what you also can do with that ID is copy it, go over to your Teams client, and paste it into the search bar. And what you would expect that you would actually find your bot from there. We see up here we didn't find any matches. So our bot apparently doesn't exist anymore. Would be something most people will think, because the documentation actually says go over to or copy the app ID, go over to the Teams client, hit the search box, insert the ID there, search for it, and then you will see your bot. No matches found. The trick is that if you go to your Teams client, you will see the Messages tab is actually selected. In order to find your bot, you need to switch to your People tab, because a bot apparently is some kind of person. And then you'll find it, and then you can click it, and the same one-to-one chat basically opens. And you can chat with your bot right within Teams. And now, what the actual cool thing about it is that we can go back to our Q&A maker service. And what we actually can do now is to grab another file which is stored in SharePoint, which is apparently a Surface Pro manual. So we have the Surface Pro manual stored here in form of a Word file. And if I grab that link, and I'm going to paste that link again within my Q&A maker service under settings. First of all, need to get rid of one of the URLs to make it work and make it editable. And then I can enable a feature which they apparently released a couple of weeks ago at Ignite, called multi-turn extraction. So what multi-turn extraction is, that you can actually not only create or extract one question and one answer, but what multi-turn extraction does is to look up the whole layout of your content. So if you have Word or PDFs, you end up having heading 1, but also you end up having heading 2, heading 3, heading 4, whatever. So you have that master subtopic scenario in there. And what Q&A Maker can actually do for you is to grab that content and keep the context. So if I save and train again, it reaches out to SharePoint Online, it gets the Word file, and what it should do now is to index the questions and answers, of course, but also what it should do is to come up with suggestions on follow-up prompts. So Q&A Maker, or in the end, your chatbot actually will not only respond with an answer, but also give the user the ability to go further into the discussion. So if the user actually has a question on setting up your Surface Pro, the chatbot or Q&A Maker in general will respond with how to set it up. But first, what the service actually needs to know is, do you want to connect the cover? Do you want to have general information on charging, for example? Because this is what the Word file in the end is displayed or storing. So if I publish that now, so I republish the whole Q&A Maker knowledge base, and apparently what happens now is that the newer question will become available instantly. So if I switch over to my Teams client again, and I ask a question, set up your Surface Pro 4, the bot will actually reach out to my knowledge base now and respond with the newer question which are in there. And now you can see here we don't only get a simple response, a text response, but we also get buttons. So I can actually click on how to connect the cover, for example, and now it will actually give me the response for connecting the cover, and therefore you could actually build such a conversation flow or such a dialogue tree if you want to without writing code. It's just done by setting up, for example, a Word file or a PDF file, or do it on your own manually right from the Q&A Maker knowledge base if you want to.
So to point out again, we didn't write a single line of code yet.
Yes.
So everything we did was just using the service. So everyone that is a little bit familiar with the Azure services should be able to do this, maybe not in 15 minutes, but of course in 1 or 2 hours. What we want to do now is that we shift gears a little bit, because based on the timing, we should just directly go one step deeper and show you another demo. Because at Ignite, like 2 weeks ago, they introduced a tool called Bot Framework Composer. The Bot Framework Composer is a graphical user interface. You will see it in a couple of seconds when Stephan switches.
Yeah, go on. Yeah. Before I show it, I actually wanna introduce them something else, but go on.
The idea of the Bot Framework Composer is that you run a local application on your machine, and you have a user interface that looks like logic apps, and you can define your dialogues in there. But it's not only that you can use a graphical user interface to define something for your bot, it also creates the code on your machine. So you can start, like Stephan did for the Q&A Maker bot. You could also extract the code from there and go deeper. For example, we're using the Q&A Maker to getting started, and then we're using translation services within in Azure, that we do something like, okay, the knowledge base may be stored in English, but I want to ask a question in German. So Azure takes my question, translates it to English, looks up the Q&A bot, gets the English answer back, retranslates it to German, and surfaces me the answer in German. And you can do that with all the available languages in the Azure Translation Service. So you can make your knowledge base multilingual and available to way more users.
Yeah. Before we actually gonna show you that, I wanna just give a quick overview what else does Microsoft offer in terms of building conversational apps and agents and dealing with conversational AI. So what we actually saw right now is we've started from one of the pre-trained AI services, which you see at our slide. So we started creating a new Q&A maker knowledge base, which is apparently one of the cognitive services for the language category. But what else do we get from Microsoft in the Azure platform? We get a SDK for building bots, which is called the Microsoft Bot Framework. So with that, you can actually write code or develop your bots. On top of that, you have a hosting platform for hosting your bots, which is called the Azure Bot Service. So Microsoft actually takes care of hosting your bot within Azure. Of course, you can host your bot anywhere else as well. So you can host it on your premises. You can host it in any other cloud or cloud provider data center as well. So you can host it in Amazon, AWS, Google Cloud Platform, or what have you. And the cool thing, which actually is a huge advantage, is that you can connect your bot, which you develop once or you set up once, and you can connect that to various channels at a time. So you can connect your bot not only to Teams, but you can also make it available for Slack or for Facebook Messenger or for Kik or Skype or whatever, without changing the code, without changing the whole overall architecture behind it. And Microsoft takes actually care of connecting your bot to those various channels. So we saw there was 2 clicks for connecting it to Teams. If you want to connect it to third parties, you may need some kind of IDs and keys from Facebook Messenger, for example, to make it available to Microsoft. But the overall vision is that you build your bot once and you run it everywhere for every channel and at any platform. And on top, what you have as well are what they call solution accelerators. So they have templates and samples out there you can actually use to get started. And if any one of you has ever looked at the Microsoft Teams App Store, there's a tab called Bots. If you click that, most probably you will be ending up with using bots which are built on those tools. So they build on the Microsoft Bot Framework. They're using some sort of AI from cognitive services, so you have that as well in there. And what they released, what Tommy said earlier, is a tool called Bot Framework Composer, which is actually they call it an IDE for building bots. And I need to make sure that it's started. Yep, it is. They call it an IDE, so Integrated Development Environment for building bots, where you don't write code. So what you can do with it is just sketch out your whole bot, conversation routines, your dialogues, your business logic actually in a visual designer, but you don't need to have or let's put it another way. You need to have some kind of development skills, but you don't need to be a developer to actually create a bot with that. So and you can find Composer right now on GitHub. You have to host it locally on your machine. There will be other options in the future as well, because it's actually 3 weeks old, the whole tool. And what you can do with it is, if you run it, you can create a new bot either from scratch, or what they also shipped are some templates you can use to get started. So what we are going to do right now is to use a template called Q&A Maker and Lewis. So Q&A Maker is the tool we used earlier, the service we used earlier, for building knowledge bases, and Lewis apparently is the language understanding part of it. So it delivers us some kind of language understanding. What name do we need?
Just making sure we didn't use the name yet.
Yeah, that's true.
What we want to do with the bot is that Stephan will hook it up to Lewis, hook it up to Q&A Maker. What we want to actually do is that the bot tells us a joke. So that's the goal. We will reach out to a public available API in the internet to get the latest Chuck Norris joke, and then surface it inside of our bot. The whole process now is running on the local host, on Stephan's machine. We can test everything in the bot with the emulator, also locally. So you don't need to upload or publish your bot yet to Azure. you can test it locally. And already from the experience from the last couple of weeks, this totally changes how we think about developing bots. With this tool, we already had a customer workshop like, okay, let's sketch out a dialogue. We just say for this action, we're going to spin up our development environment and bring in our development team to make this one call to this API, but everything in the dialogues, the whole flow, the whole conversation flow, just done within this tool. It used to be that you needed to create everything from scratch in the version 3 of the bot framework. Then they came up with a dialogue management. We have a text file. But this is really like the tool that you can say, okay, let's do it in 2 or 3 hours, go through to the dialogue management, and your business users already can click it in the emulator, so they can feel and experience the bot right away. So go ahead and tell us a nice joke.
What we see on the main dialogue page actually is on the right-hand side we have our language understanding part. So what we actually need to do to make that work is to bring in some kind of language understanding for telling a joke. So what we want to do is to create a new what's called intent for getting jokes, for example. And what we then need to tell the language understanding model which kind of utterances do users usually use in order to trigger that intent. So we apparently have tell me a joke.
Stephan is not just thinking of a few options that we can interact with the bot, and you see the notation here he's using, like the predefined values already there. Basically now he's defining our language understanding model. If you used Louis already in the cloud, like in the shell from Azure, you used to define your entities, you used to define your intents. With this tool now, just a text, and when we start our bot, the first time we upload this information, or the tool uploads the information to Azure, creates the language understanding model so that the bot can really understand what we're defining here. It's a new notation, so to speak, to create our language understanding model.
Yes, and then what is the Xbox game bar? Never seen that before.
You have things installed.
So what I did right now is to sketch out my language understanding model. For the sake of simplicity, I just chose 4 sample utterances. Of course, in a production environment, you would choose more, but I have some sample phrases in there. And right now, what I need is to create a new trigger for that. So on the left-hand side, I have my triggers, and the type of trigger, of course, is intent because it's based on the language understanding part. And there we see getting jokes as an intent. So if I choose that, I have my now the visual designer open for that exact part of the conversation when it's about jokes. And as Tommy said earlier, we want to get some jokes from a public-facing API. So if you actually are sketching out your whole dialogues and the whole conversation, what you can do with it or with the composer is to send a response, of course, but you can also prompt. So you can ask questions. We expect something like a text or a number, a confirmation, or what have you. And so therefore it gets validated automatically. So if you don't enter a number, but you expect a number, the bot will actually re-ask the user to provide a number in that case. What you also can do is to work with conditions. So you have if, else statements in there, switches, for each loops and whatever. What you also could do is to actually jump to other dialogues within your dialogue. So you can call another dialogue and get the conversation back and forth quicker. What you also could do, and what we're going to do right now, is to reach out to external data sources. So access external data sources. And if you see that, you can of course reach out to any data source. So you can reach out to your APIs you have on your premises. You can reach out to your SAP system. You can reach out to your CRM system, whatever. And you don't actually need to write code to do that. You can do it right from that visual designer. So what I want to do is to send an HTTP request. The HTTP request should be of type GET. What I need in my cheat sheet here is the URL. So it's some Chuck Norris URL apparently, some Chuck Norris API. And what I need to provide here is some kind of variable where I store the response in. So it's the result property I'm going to set. And therefore, right now, within my jokes dialogues, if anyone tells me a joke or asks for a joke, the bot would reach out to the API to get that joke. But what I do need now is to respond with that joke I got from the API. So what I need to do right now is to respond with some phrases, and you see it right here. I don't can respond with only one phrase, but we have that kind of language generation part in there as well. So we can make the conversation more human-like, to not respond with the exact same phrase every time, but it will randomly pick and choose one response which you actually created in there or added in there, and will respond with that. So we are gonna respond with some phrase followed by dialog.joke response, which is the property we stored the API response in, and then some content.value, which is actually the value of our HTTP response we get. So with that, what we can do right now is to start the bot. If we start the bot, it will ask us for a Lewis key. So you need to provide a Lewis key for the language understanding part of it. And what it actually does now, you see it on the top right corner, is to publish not the bot, but the language understanding part of it. So it creates our language understanding model right within our Azure subscription. So it will do all the scaffolding in there. It will add the intents, the entities, the uterances in there. And when it's done, you see we have a button called Test in Emulator. If I click that, the bot framework emulator gets opened on my client and connects to the bot, which is running on my local host. And what I could do now is to say, tell me a joke. And right now, what it should do is to reach out to the public-facing API and respond with that joke. And what you also could do, if you're then really into development and you want to actually know how the thing is working in behind the curtains, is to check the traces you have in there. So you can check, for example, what was my result for hitting the language understanding model of it. Which kind of confidence score did I get back? In that case, it was 93% sure that tell me a joke belongs to the intent of telling jokes, of course. And you can check actually and debug what's going on behind the curtains.
With that demo now, we will be able to just publish this bot as well to Azure, and then you have a bot that tells you a joke if you ask for it. What we realized when we played with this API, that sometimes, let's say, the jokes get really offensive. And to make sure that in our next step, we're really safe to show this actual at such a big stage, what we want to add is that we use Azure Text Sentiment to get the sentiment of the text from the joke, and then make the bot a little bit more sophisticated in saying, okay, we create a threshold and go, let's say, above 50 or 30, whatever the sentiment will be. Only then the joke is safe enough to be shown on the big screen. So Stephan is going to now call out another service, because the text analytics from Azure can also be consumed as a web service. And we take the response now that we get from the joke API and going to validate its, not readability, but more like, is it really a good idea to show this on a big screen? We get the value back, and based on this value, we decide, okay, we want to show it, or just go back like, no, the joke we got back might be not good enough for our screen.
So yeah, we're going to do that. So what I need apparently is a new HTTP request to reach out to my text analytics API. And this time I need to do a post request on a certain URL I have stored in my cheat notepad. So I need to provide a URL for calling the text analytics API. And what I also need is to give it some kind of body in there. And there I actually just pass what I get back from my first API call, so the choke apparently in a JSON field. And what I also need in there is a header for actually authenticating against the text analytics API. So I need a subscription key to provide it with. And what I also need is to give it some kind of property as well. So we fill or we create a new property called dialog.textAnalytics. And with that, what we can then do is to create a new action in there, which apparently is then an if clause, so a condition, saying that if my response, which I get back from in there, is apparently above a certain level, what it should do is to either display the choke or not. So we can work with some simple validation in there, and I don't need the parentheses. Then it's good. So our condition would be if the score we get back, so the confidence score, or not the confidence, but the sentiment score we get back from our text analytics API call is above 0.5%, we can we're most probably safe to display the choke. If not, then not. What I actually found out just a couple of minutes before the session is that there's a bug in there. So if you don't use an English operating system and an English locale, and you insert 0.5, your machine will actually translate that most probably, or in my case it was the case, to 0.5, and then the whole condition won't work. So what I need to do before is to actually create a new variable, store that response in that variable, and then actually transform that string to an integer. So I'm gonna initialize a new property, which is called choke response or something, or let's stick to the naming convention. Choke response. TA, text analytics, it's of type object. Then I need to set that property. So it's dialog.choke response, set it, make it an integer. And then what I can do right with it is to go to the statement, use that as my input condition, and then apparently I can do, or I can copy my responses I have down there and say if it's true, send the response. If it's not true, send a response saying, sorry, but I cannot display that choke here right now, and delete the other message. So if we are done, apparently we can restart the bot, so it will restart the whole logic in the backend. We can go over to our emulator, restart it, say tell me a choke, and normally what it does now is, sorry, I cannot display that because the sentiment score we got back was lower than it should have been. So if I ask that again, yeah, we might get just a couple of chokes back, which are apparently lower than 0.5. But basically with that, we can integrate not only bot services in there, but we can also integrate third-party APIs in there. And as you can see, one actually doesn't have to be a developer to use that tool to build bots. Tommy already mentioned it. What you also can do from the composer is to go over to my settings pane, and there you have an option for deploying your bot to Azure. So you will be able to actually not only create that bot within your composer on your local machine and host it on your local machine, but you also will be able to deploy your bot to your Azure tenant. same as we did within the first demo, but not from the Q&A maker side of things, but running a PowerShell script to actually create all the resources in Azure. So what you get back, or what the composer actually offers you, is that you just say create Azure resources, you give it a name, so it could be ESPC 2019. You paste in there some kind of app secret. It has to be one number and one special character in it. And then you go next. And what you see then is that it actually creates or gives you two statements in there for running a PowerShell script, which actually then would create all the resources on behalf for you. So you don't actually need to spend time on creating the resources, manually going through the Azure portal and create all that stuff, and then upload your bot's code to it. This is all done by Composer. Apparently, what we saw within the Composer actually in the back end, if you look at it, what it does, it creates a new project in there, and within there, it creates your bot's code. So it creates C# code for you. So business users could actually use the Composer as some kind of tool to sketch out the whole bot, and then if they at some point in time are, let's say, finished, or there are certain areas they can't do right within the Composer, they could actually call a developer to extend that. But for lightweight use cases, you could actually use Composer as your whole bot building platform, and you don't have to write code with it. Just need to make
to the Composer interface for a second.
Yeah.
Because what Microsoft also announced at Ignite is that in the future, bot framework will be able to have skills. So like Amazon has for years now, the Alexa skills, they align their naming also to skills. What you can do, if you just go to the creation pane of the Composer, is that you can add your skills into your dialogues. So the idea is that you stay in Composer for the high-level architecture, and then you grab a new skill and integrate it in there. So the idea is not that you go there, create it once with the nice interface, and then start coding in the C# area. The idea is that you stay here, and then only one action, one rectangle here, is a certain skill that the developer creates, that you can reuse in different bots. So at the end of the day, you use Composer again and again and again, and then you just pull in code through a skill, and a skill is nothing different than a bot. That's a little bit complicated at first thinking, but what happens in the background is that your bot then calls out the skill, so a bot calls another bot, hands over whatever value you defined, gets the answer back, and you can reuse it in your dialogue. So you can create dialogues within Composer and extend it for skills, and then you can create something like a concierge bot. So in your company, you only deploy one bot, and then this bot reaches out whatever intent it detects. Because what we already also experienced is that sometimes we end up deploying 5 or 6 bots to the same company, and then we have created the same problem we already have with SharePoint. People don't know which bot they should ask, actually. They have a question, then they have 5 different bots, and then they need to think, what is the right connection? So the idea is more that you create one concierge bot, and given the intent, this bot then reaches out to different skills, to different bots in the back end. And with Composer, you can easily align those things, create your dialogues, and when you really need to go deeper, not only you can call APIs, because we call the secured API within Azure just from the interface here, but you can go even deeper and integrate your own systems as a skill, and then you can go really, maybe a little bit crazy and create really, really great bots with that.
Good with that. I guess we have just one more thing to add. Yep. Everything you saw, not everything, but most of the things you saw today, you can look up on YouTube as well. So if you want to go through or walk through the process of creating the knowledge base and creating the bot, just watch the webinars, which are apparently available under this URL. And with that, I guess we're done.
000. point in time. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Have safe travels back home, and hopefully
Safe
see you
travels.
next year. Thank you.
And of course, if you have questions, we're here, so you can actually ask us.
If you have any questions, come down here because it's a little bit awkward to answer the question at a distance.